capitalist oppressors. Okay. And he was a major figure in the Black Panther Party, Minister of Information. Soul on Ice was a major, is almost considered like a left-wing classic. And, you know, so that's the kind of person he was.
Power, that lens of power.
Yes, yes. And yeah, and that's an interesting thing to point out, regardless of what Marxists say, Marxist, socialist, communist, whatever you want to say, it all comes down to power over people's lives.
Yeah.
And just because I come up to you and say, hey, you know, I don't like poverty, it's horrible, we got poverty and we should help people. And then I turn around and kill people you disagree with me. And some of those people who I disagree with me are the oppressed workers I'm trying to help. I mean, it comes out. I mean, you look at the Russian Revolution, you saw that. You look at Che Guevara, you saw that. I mean, it's all there. So I, you know, maybe I shouldn't say this, but that kind of stuff didn't necessarily change me, so to speak. But what got me was like just little simple things like, well, I can say pretty much whatever I want to say to the United States and not really worry about getting my booty kicked by the government.
Absolutely.
But I knew you couldn't do that in North Korea or Cuba. I knew that.
Yeah.
I knew that.
There's a lot of places you can't. I mean, it's
right.
It's illegal to homeschool in Germany still,
right,
you know.
So,
why?
I was like, well, how's this better? How's having a socialist America going to be better for me? And you know, then it slowly and surely just hit me. And there, you know, I was a big advocate of the revolution in Zimbabwe, Patriotic Front and all. And then I had the good fortune to be able to travel there soon after Mugabe had taken power. And I was at a party, so I was excited. I thought people would be excited. You know, we got Mugabe in power and socialism and all this other kind of good stuff. And you know, sis, they were scared to talk.
Wow. It's that First Amendment that we just take for granted.
Yes.
We do. And the some of the people, my friends who are immigrants have noticed that, and Rod Dura talks about this in his book, Live Not by Lies, how they noticed that people whispered. There was especially the time, you know, prior to the election where people would whisper the things that they believed or felt or, you know, their opinions, they would whisper them. And the people from other countries are going, why are we whispering? We have the First Amendment here. This is not okay. Because it's not going to be the government that shuts down our speech. It's going to be the culture that shuts down our speech. And so you can't say, well, the government's infringing on my First Amendment right. Maybe it's not the government, but it's going to be the culture that cancels you or blocks you or shuts you down. Or, you know, there's all these flags going up on social media right now in case you were exposed to some kind of evil that you're not aware of. So, you know, it's going to be the culture that silences. But the First Amendment is so important. And I think that for so many of these, especially young people, just don't really appreciate what the First Amendment does for us here in America. It's unique. It is so unique. And so
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely correct. And the emphasis you have there on culture, again, it was cultural Marxism. It wasn't quote unquote traditional Marxism.
Right.
It had an impact. It was called Antonio Gramsci, Marcuse, and all those guys. It's the cultural Marxism. And I think sometimes that's why sometimes I would even, it would bother me. I'm trying to organize Black conservative podcasters for us to do things like this, just to talk amongst ourselves and to talk about things that's happened in the national Black community. And obviously to talk about critical race theory. But one thing also to talk about how many times Black Marxists are able to get away with murder because they're Black. They're Black and they're anti-racist, and they're perceived as anti-racist, therefore they're perceived as being pro-Black community. And like one stark example of that is Angela Davis. She was a member of the Communist Party USA under Gus Hall, straight up Stalinist. Now there was a split in the party, and she went with the split sort of away from the Stalinists, but she's a hardcore Marxist-Leninist.
Right.
And then a couple of years ago in Alabama, they do an annual reward. Fred Shuttlesworth, he was the man who influenced King to become an activist minister. and they were going to give her the Fred Shuttlesworth Award. Imagine that.
Wow.
You're going to give somebody an award who's been advocating this system for decades that will shut you down as soon as they come to power.
Yeah. Yes, but our culture is in the habit of putting people on pedestals who maybe don't belong there. We have started celebrating some more negative behaviors rather than celebrating the positive. And in fact, we tend to not we, but the culture tends to denigrate those who speak out on truth and what is right. Those are the people that the culture would actually like to wipe off and not recognize. So yeah, it's really unfortunate. And
yeah, I agree. So it was
that is stunning. It truly is.
I mean, we're gonna give
give an award.
A Marxist a reward for civil rights.
But I did read I think it was Dr. Lowry who wrote the article after they put the George Floyd statue up, and how he felt, and I think it was him, and I apologize if I'm wrong, but and how he was saying that he felt like it was an insult to the people who have gone before, who truly did amazing things, that the Black heroes and heroines of our country who blazed trails and paved way for people. And those are the people who deserve statues and should be celebrated. And I would have to find the article to verify that it was him that did it.
They weren't. It was really, you're right. Those who came before us were not career criminals. That guy was a career criminal. His record is clear. It's obvious. He even had an incident where he, during part of some type of robbery or something, a home invasion, he pointed a loaded gun at a pregnant woman's stomach. I mean, can you imagine a Medgar Evers doing something like that, or Whitney M. Young, or Rosa Parks? I mean, it's ridiculous. And even this thing with Breonna Taylor, she's all over the place. Well, I'm sorry the sister got killed. And speaking as a parent, I'd probably die if my daughter got killed. But before that time, I would be saying to her, wait a minute, you're under what type of criminal investigation? For doing what? And you're associating with who? Better call your mama, girl.
Yeah, and I think that there's certainly a way to mourn the loss of individuals and to make sure that justice is done in whatever the situation is. But I think that making heroes out of everyone who is unjustly killed is not necessarily the way to go. I know I have 4 children. I have a certain expectation of the people that they would look up to, that they would want to, sort of strive to live in, or follow in their footsteps. And those aren't the qualifications for my kids. And I feel like that's across the board. I don't think that that's just one race that wants their kids to look up to high standards and do that. You can address injustices without putting people on pedestals that maybe don't.
Right. No, I completely agree with that. But the problem we're having more within the Black community is that we don't have voices saying something that simple. They're silenced. They're suppressed. Yeah. Oftentimes with very abusive language. And that's the issue. Again, as you pointed out earlier, the cultural factor.
Right. Right.
I cannot tell you the number of times I've talked with Black folk privately. Corbin, I can't believe that. Oh, well, man, come on my show or say something on Facebook. No, I can't do that, man.
Yeah.
And they express legitimate fear. Some express fear of losing their jobs, that kind of stuff.
So when you walked into the celebration after the socialist government took over and you saw people in fear, and then you walk into these places and you see people living in fear, it's not that different, except that one is being silenced by the government. And the other one is being silenced by their next door neighbors or their peers. And so it's really unfortunate that we've come to that place in our country. We need more conversations. We need more speech. We need to be talking. We need to be having discourses that are productive and healing and bringing reconciliation. And we're not. People have just shut down the conversation.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. And, let's go back to critical race theory a little bit. I often, I don't mind engaging a little intellectual tug and pull here and there. But Lord have mercy. What does this have to do with education? Critical race theory. When I just pulled up some stats, actually from an article you had posted from 2018 to 2019, Jefferson County Public Schools. This Jefferson County Public Schools openly admitting this. This is from them, not from me. You know, this isn't from your group. This isn't from someone like a Trevor Loudon or a Larry Elder. This is from them. Only 27% of Black youth in the elementary school level are at the reading proficiency level. 27%. 27%. And that's just one, on middle school level reading, Black students, 32%. Middle school, 32%. High school, they reported 20%, went down. 27, 32, 20, went down. And yet, the graduation rate is in the high 80s and 90s. So basically what you're telling me is that they're issuing diplomas to people who are just functional illiterates and doing this time and time again. Dude, we
have decades of research and data to support the fact that students who learn how to read by the time they're in third grade are exponentially more likely to be successful, to stay in school, to either go on to secondary school or be successful in a trade by third grade. So in my opinion, why are we pouring millions and millions and millions of dollars into, they're calling it diversity, equity, inclusion. It's basically critical race theory in practice. And rather than pouring millions and millions of dollars into, they call it wraparound services, wrap around these kids, get these kids learning by the time they are in third grade, because once fourth grade hits, they're no longer learning to read, they're reading to learn. And you can't read to learn if you can't read. And so you say it goes down in high school. Well, because by the time they get to high school, they've checked out. They can't read that social studies book. They can't read the science book. They've checked out. They're done. I mean, all you have to do is read a few Facebook posts of people who graduates of some of the public schools here in our county to know that they can't write sentences. That you ask a college professor about their first year English students, they can't write a paper. They can't do that. And then we want to talk about the wealth gap. There's this wealth gap. Well, you are graduating people who cannot read past fourth grade. How exactly are they supposed to compete in the workforce and get that promotion if they don't have the same skills that the person that they're competing against has? Because you let them move through the system to be equitable, to keep our diversity numbers down. You let them move through the system, but you didn't equip them with the skills. And that is an injustice. And every parent, every taxpayer, everybody should be livid about this. Our millions of dollars should be going to teaching these kids to read. Frederick Douglass said, once you learn to read, you cannot be enslaved. They cannot be enslaved by false ideology. They cannot be enslaved by generational poverty, addiction, abuse. They can get out. They have the means to get out. You talk to Ben Carson, his story right there in a nutshell. His mother made sure he learned how to read and loved to read. And that's what he did. And he escaped. And everybody says, well, he's the exception to the rule. No, he's not. There are millions and millions of successful Black people all over this country. And to say that he's the exception is an insult to the Black community, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You're saying that they can't achieve. And I think that that's insulting.
But critical race theory, does it teach that? Or does it teach something else?
Well, critical race theory removes the personal accountability. So basically it tells them that you're not achieving because the institution is not, the system is not allowing you to achieve, rather than saying, you know what, you're coming a little bit behind, because we do also have statistics on the the early childhood education with minorities versus other populations, and they do lag behind in the early childhood. So they might come to kindergarten a year or two behind their peers. All that means is we need to provide more wraparound services for those kids. It's not because the system is going to keep them back. It's because we need more resources in place. I am all for that.
And are we not also, you touched upon this earlier, isn't this also an issue of who is the first, last, and best educator for our children?
Yeah. And that's one of my big things that I remind parents. it's our responsibility. At the end of the day, it is our responsibility as parents. You know, my children, my daughter